Elm Street, silent, oppressive, a street where shadows lingered long after the sun dipped below the horizon. It held its breath, trapped in an eternal twilight. At its heart stood a house of secrets. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out blankly, daring anyone to unravel its mysteries. The house was once grand, a testament to a bygone era. Now it was a decaying corpse, its paint peeling like scabs, its timbers rotting. The front porch sagged, threatening to spill its secrets onto the overgrown lawn. It was a place where time stood still, where the past clung to the present with icy fingers. No one dared to approach the house on Elm Street. It stood alone, ostracized by the other houses, as if they knew its terrible truth. The townsfolk whispered tales of its gruesome past, stories whispered from generation to generation, each telling more horrifying than the last. Three friends, Jake, Emily, and Chris, stood at the edge of the property, their youthful curiosity battling with primal fear. Jake, the bold one, itched to uncover the truth behind the local legends. Emily, the skeptic, was determined to debunk the myths. Chris, ever the cautious one, felt a shiver crawl down his spine as he looked at the imposing structure. The old house seemed to beckon them, its silence a siren song in the twilight. They had heard the stories, of course. Who hadn't? But they were just stories, weren't they? They were determined to find out. The rusty gate creaked open with a groan, as if warning them back. They stepped onto the overgrown path, their footsteps loud in the stillness. As they neared the house, the air grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. It pressed down on them, suffocating their courage. The front door, hanging by a single hinge, creaked open with a mournful sigh. The smell hit them first, musty, decaying, the smell of time and neglect. Dust motes danced in the faint slivers of light that pierced the gloom. The house swallowed the light, making it seem as if the shadows themselves were alive. Each footstep echoed through the silent house, the sound seeming to reverberate off unseen walls. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. They moved deeper into the house, their voices hushed, their laughter gone. A sudden creak from upstairs sent shivers down their spines. Jake, his bravado faltering, shone his flashlight up the stairs. The beam flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. The darkness felt deeper up there, more profound. They ascended the stairs, their breaths shallow, their hearts pounding in their chests. The air grew colder as they climbed, the silence broken only by the creaking of the old house and their own ragged breathing. The hallway upstairs stretched before them, a tunnel of shadows and dust. Emily, her hand trembling, ran her fingers along the cobweb-draped wall. She stopped, her fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. She held her breath, her heart pounding, and slowly pulled the object free of the dust and cobwebs. It was a locket, tarnished with age but still beautiful. It was cold in her hand, as if it had been buried in ice. She flicked it open, and inside she saw two faded photographs. One was of a young woman with laughing eyes, the other of a man with a kind face. They were both dressed in the fashion of another era. "Who are they?" Chris whispered, his voice barely audible above the sudden pounding of his heart. The locket felt heavy in Emily's hand, as if it held the weight of forgotten sorrow. She could almost feel the echoes of their joy, their love, their pain. Suddenly the air seemed to crackle around them. A cold wind swept down the hallway, stirring the dust and cobwebs, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a voice. They froze, their blood turning to ice in their veins. The voice grew stronger, clearer. It was a woman's voice, filled with a deep, bone-chilling sorrow. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very air they breathed. They couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a plea filled with anguish and despair. They stumbled back, fear lending speed to their feet. They tripped over their own feet, scrambling to get away from the voice, from the oppressive darkness that seemed to be closing in on them. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a sight that stopped them dead in their tracks. There, hanging on the wall in a dusty, ornate frame, was a portrait of the woman from the locket. She was beautiful, her eyes sparkling with life, her lips curved into a gentle smile. But as they watched, the smile seemed to fade, replaced by an expression of pure terror. The portrait's eyes seemed to lock onto them, and a scream, high-pitched and filled with unimaginable agony, tore through the silence. It was the same voice they had heard moments before, but now it was amplified, magnified, a chorus of pain echoing through the empty house. They spun around, desperate to escape the house, the screaming portrait, the oppressive darkness. They raced down the hallway, their footsteps pounding on the wooden floor, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. But the house had other plans. The floorboards beneath them groaned and shifted. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. The shadows seemed to lengthen, reaching out towards them with grasping, skeletal fingers. The house was alive, and it was angry. The hallway stretched before them, endless, the exit nowhere in sight. They were trapped, caught in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. They were no longer alone. Panic surged through them, threatening to overwhelm their senses. They pushed forward, their flight fueled by pure terror. They could hear the woman's screams echoing behind them, urging them on, her despair fueling their own. Finally, they burst through a door at the end of the hallway and into a small, dusty bedroom. A window, its glass cracked and filthy, offered a beacon of hope. Jake, his hands shaking, fumbled with the latch, throwing the window open with a grunt. One by one, they scrambled through the window, cutting themselves on the shards of glass, their clothes snagged on the jagged edges of the broken pane. They didn't stop, didn't look back, until they were far away from the house on Elm Street. They collapsed on the grass, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. They didn't speak, couldn't speak, as the events of the last few minutes replayed in their minds. The house on Elm Street had given them a glimpse into its dark heart, and it was a sight they would never forget. As they lay there, catching their breath, their eyes were drawn back to the house. It stood at the end of the street, silent and watchful, its secrets still locked within its decaying walls. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn, and for a moment they could have sworn they saw the ghostly figure of a woman standing at the upstairs window, her sorrowful eyes fixed on them. They never spoke of what they saw that night, but the memory lingered, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their ordinary world. The house on Elm Street remained a silent sentinel guarding its secrets, a testament to the horrors that can lie hidden in plain sight. And the question remained, who were the people in the locket and what had happened to them in that house?